Welcome to the Nova East Region 11 Coaches Training session on encouraging creativity. My name is Pamela Clark, and I'm a resource teacher for the gifted in Arlington at Campbell Elementary School. And I've been in Arlington for quite a while. And I've been with Odyssey for quite a while too. But only in the last 3 years have I been co-directing the region with my friend Nancy Ragland. Nancy?
Hey, my name is Nancy Ragland, and I am a retired resource gifted teacher from Fairfax County. Just still loving Odyssey, been with Odyssey since 1981. It's another way to keep creativity going, and glad you could come.
Also with us, we have Geneva Moores, and she is going to be recording the session for us. She's our treasurer and has been helping us out with all of this technology. So for today, we wanted to remind you that there's another session at 2 on the app called Discord. So you might want to come back or stick around for that one or watch that on our playlist. And then later sessions are always on a Sunday. And they usually are beginning at 1 o'clock. And we have the same Zoom link for each of them. But if you missed some of our previous ones, feel free to get on Nova East odysseyofthemind.wordpress.com, click on Coaches Training Videos, and you can see any of our previous videos. We're so glad that Odyssey is still happening in this strange year, because it teaches divergent problem solving. And as you know, a lot of problem solving that we do, there's one answer. But the great thing is this is divergent problem solving. So it allows the kids to use creativity to explore many ways to solve a problem. So we're so glad we're able to do this. And we're going to kick it off with one of the things we want you doing in all of your Odyssey sessions, or lots of them anyway, to get lots of ideas. And that's called brainstorming. So Nancy, take it.
All right. Brainstorming. Pam, am I supposed to be on the camera now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Brainstorming is really the heart of everything. And once your kids get used to it, you can just say, all right, drop and give me brainstorm right now, and they'll get going. But there's some things to think about. It sounds very easy, and it is, but you have to remember some basic rules. All responses are valued the same. When I brainstorm with kids, I will just point to them. They'll give me their response. I point to somebody. I don't respond one way or the other. I don't say, oh, that was great, because then everybody else thinks, I can't do anything as good as that. Or really, because then you've lost them. They're not going to contribute anymore at all. And occasionally you will have some replies that border on inappropriate. I don't respond. I just point to the next person and go on, because I don't want them to have the fun of me getting involved. So every response is valued. You don't give any kind of credit to either kind of response. You just keep going. Brainstorming is not the time to critique. So you don't want to say things like, oh, I don't think we have the money for that. That's one of the goes on how to kill ideas. Or, well, no, we've never done anything like that before. I don't think we could do that. Or anything that critiques an idea, because then you've lost the brainstorming. You've lost the momentum. So you tell them that all the responses we will take, and then afterwards, we're going to set up criteria to judge that. By that time, the child is a little bit separated from their response. So it's not like you're criticizing their idea. It becomes a whole part of everything, and then you do your criteria. And the kids are really good about making the criteria. They might say, well, it can't be too expensive. Or my mom and my principal and my teacher need to think it's okay. It can't be too dangerous. But you never say, I don't think we can do that. Because you put everything out right then. So you've got your ideas, and you brainstorm a lot of different things. That's a big part of your spontaneous training, is going to be brainstorming. So then we have a strategy called FFOE, fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration. So the fluency part is as many responses as you can get. Now, I will tell you, when I did this in school, I would ask them to name types of cookies. And this might make a good spontaneous problem too, to start them out on when they're not used to this procedure. So they would name, millions of cookies, and they would be in groups, which you're in your team, you might want each child to do their own list. And then after they had their list, it's time for flexibility, which is putting them into categories. So I would tell the groups, I said, I want your group to decide how many categories do you need for these cookies and what they will be. No wrong answers here. And I've had every kind of thing you can imagine, from, one team that had almost as many categories as they had cookies, and another one that just said cookies with chocolate and cookies without. No wrong. Everything's great. So now that they have them into categories, you start, and one person reads their list, but everybody has to have a pencil ready and focus on their list, because if I have chocolate chip on my list, I'm reading it out and I say chocolate chip, every other person that has chocolate chip has to cross that off, and so do I. So that way you get rid of all the duplicate responses. And what you're left with are original responses that nobody else has. So the final part, which to me is the fun part, is the elaboration. Now that you've told me, let's say we whittle down these cookies and the winning cookie is a peppermint lemon drop. Okay, what can we do to that peppermint lemon drop to make it more original, to elaborate, to add to it, make it more glamorous, make it bigger? So it might be that you take it from being a cookie into like a lollipop, the cake pop things. Or it might be that you, instead of a peppermint, you have it quartered up and you have peppermint and spearmint and all these other mints on different parts. It's up to the group, because you're elaborating. You're not thinking about, will it sell? Just, does it work? So with your kids, like I say, you can use that example as a spontaneous verbal problem. But the way you would use it later on, let's say you're doing a problem and something has to move. So the brainstorming part might be, let's list all the ways that things move. And you write them down. I used a big chart tablet. And then when we finished with that list, I would tape it onto a coat hanger and hang it in a certain place. And that way later on, if somebody said, I don't know how to make this move, we'll go check the chart. So got the fluency, flexibility, then you can say, okay, all these ideas of ways things move. What we have to move is a vehicle. So let's go through and put categories of the way things move, the way small things move. It might be, and there again, they're picking their categories. It might be way things move without touching. They come up with the categories. You weed out the ones that several people thought of, because if several people in your group thought of it, you can bet several people in other teams will too. And then when you get your original, then you can start saying, okay, we've got the original, the way, let's test it, let's see what happens, and let's improve it. You can do that with a lot of things. Maybe something has to grow. Okay, what are some ways something could appear to grow on stage? Depending on your problem, depending on that, you let the kids pick their categories. But my kids got used to, every time they'd say, Well, how do we, let's say, brainstorm, make a chart. So they learned pretty quickly that I wasn't going to tell them anything, that's what you want. So that is FFOE, brainstorming, just to kind of wrap it up a little bit. It is a free flowing use of responses. And one other thing you will notice, if you're going along and you're getting mostly average ideas, and then all of a sudden there's quiet and nobody's saying anything, that's great, because they're getting ready to make the jump to a higher level. So just sit there. It's very hard to have a vacuum and not talk. Just sit, try to keep your face pleasant. Don't look like you're about to cry or anything. And then pretty soon somebody will say, like, for instance, if you were brainstorming rocks and you've got all these different kind of rocks, somebody might say rocking chair. They've just made a leap to a higher level of ways to use rocks. So when you hit a plateau, hang in there, it'll get better. You're going to do brainstorming, will be the basis of everything you do, and we hope we've made it a little bit easier.
Right. And like she mentioned, spontaneous problems are the perfect time to do that. And this year in Spontaneous, all 17 members can compete because it's all done virtually, and all of our problems are going to be virtual in the tournament. In the PowerPoint, which you'll be able to access online later, along with the video, you'll see the sheet, How to Kill Ideas, which was actually designed for businesses. And we highlighted the ones that are most applicable for team use. And then she mentioned the fluency, flexibility, originality, and elaboration creative thinking tool. So the next one we want to move to is a creative thinking tool called Scamper. And Scamper is a tool that you can use to get kids also thinking in lots of different directions. And you're going to, this sheet, which will be on the PowerPoint, also has an idea of thinking about an apple in a whole lot of different ways. But Scamper just means substitute, combine, adapt, minimize or maximize, put to other uses, eliminate, or rearrange. When you're using Scamper, you can think about lots of things that have been invented in the past. So for instance, most things that have been invented were a substitution for something that just wasn't working so well. So maybe you wanted to get something pounded in, so you used your fist for a long time. And then they invented a hammer, right? And that they substituted that hammer so your hand wouldn't hurt, and they used that instead. Then at some point, they decided to go ahead and, instead of using just a hammer, regular hammer, they added this. They combined it with a claw, and that claw then of course can be used to take nails out. So they're combining it. So many things that you see, inventions, are actually a combination of more than one thing. So it's helpful to look around, have the kids look around at things that are around them that started as something else and someone substituted or combined it, or maybe adapted. So you can actually adapt a hammer too. And this hammer, instead of having metal, has rubber or plastic on the end, and that way it won't hurt whatever you're hammering on. It would also, you could hammer wood or things like that and it won't split the wood. So it's simply adapted, and really what they've done is just kind of replace something. You've probably seen hammers that are teeny tiny for small jobs, and giant hammers that are used to really pound something into place, or even jackhammers. So that too is a creative adaptation of hammers. You can put hammers to different use. For instance, this hammer could also be used for crushing ice for some yummy fruit drinks that have lots of ice in them, or crushing up lifesavers or candies to put in cookies at this season. Or you can eliminate something from the hammer that doesn't work, maybe eliminating the handle because it gets in the way. So having something that pound, but getting rid of this hammer handle, or rearranging it so that instead of hammering something that's down below, it hammers something that's up. And you think, well, how does this apply to Odyssey? Well, kids are going to have to do this for Odyssey too. So the Odyssey problems often have something that you have to have in it, or your team decides on a theme. So maybe their theme is fruit. And in that scene, they have a character that's going to be on the phone. So guess what they use for the phone? They use a banana. So they've simply substituted the banana for the phone and kept along with their theme to make it a little bit more creative. Sometimes you combine ideas too so that teams feel that there's a sense of consensus. For instance, I know that one of our teams this year was trying to think about a creative team name, and one person wanted the bugs and one person wanted the lions. So they have the Juicy Bug Lions, and that's their team name. And they just simply were able to combine it in that way. Or rearranging things. And combining. So for instance, they had to figure out the name of a robot in a primary problem one year. There was a space theme and they had this space robot. And of course, one of the kids wanted to name it after himself. So did another kid. One of the kids came up with the idea to take the first letter of each kid's name and name it SOMAP. So it was Stephen and Oliver and Matt and Alex and I can't remember the P name, Pat or whatever. So they named it SOMAP just after their letters. And that was using their own creativity to come to an idea. Or minimizing things. Maybe they don't have a human character playing everything, but they might have a puppet. So they're minimizing, and one of the characters is actually a small puppet. Or they make something gigantic just to make it stand out and really seem impressive to their problem. Or they might get rid of something. You know, sometimes you get a solution and it's just not working, and your team needs to know it's okay sometimes just to eliminate a piece. But what you don't want is to have a child feeling like they've eliminated their piece. So like going back to what Nancy was talking about, putting those ideas on a chart or maybe a Google Doc in this era. And then it's not actually linked to a certain person. It's a team's idea. And that team's idea right now, it's just not working in the way that they're solving it. So they're going to eliminate that piece of it. But we don't want any team member to feel like we're taking away their idea. It's a team's idea that just isn't working. So that's one great reason to really write things down and revisit it later too, to gives the sense that these are all our ideas and we're trying to work through them. And just because we eliminate something that originally was your idea, it just wasn't working at this time, but there's something else that you've done that we are including, because everybody needs to feel part of the process.
Pam, could I add something?
Yes.
Sometimes, especially if your team is new, if they haven't done Odyssey, when Pam used the example about needing a telephone, most of them are going to go for a toy phone. That would be what they would think, because they haven't done Odyssey yet. They don't know that the world is out there to explore. So with my one of my fifth grade groups, we were doing a project. They had to do research on, I don't even remember what it was at this point, but they had to do research, and then they had to show me a way to show that what they had learned. But I told them, I said, I don't want to see a poster. I've seen lots of posters. Most of them are just ho-hum. So we scampered and we went through and we said, okay, we don't want to use poster board to display. Let's ask, what can we do to substitute for the poster board? We got tree bark, we got fabric, we got put it on the side of a flower pot. So once they got used to doing that, they now, when you say, we need to call somebody, toy phone no longer is the first choice. That Scamper has opened them up so that now they say, oh, well, we could use that banana and it could have a dial on it, or, you know, we could have push buttons on, maybe the flower pot has push buttons. So this is why it's so valuable to teams. It opens them up to move beyond just the regular thing.
Exactly.
Sorry, Pam, I just wanted
to. No,
that.
I'm glad you inserted your. So I've seen teams like when they were making a jellyfish, they used an umbrella and had all the tentacles hanging from the outside of the umbrella. And that's just a creative use of of making a jellyfish. Primary team had a sea theme, and they had to rearrange. They couldn't figure out a way to hold up their backdrop, and their backdrop was related to the sea, the ocean. But they didn't want two or three of their team members to have to be the people holding it up. So they decided, guess what? We're going to put the backdrop right on the floor. And we're going to swim right on top of it. They rearranged it so that it would work for their problem. And there was another year where socks had to be involved in the solution. So somehow the team had to integrate socks into whatever they were doing. So taking that sock, you can roll it up, you could braid it, you could cut it open, you could make puppet. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do with socks instead of just have it be on your feet, right? So just being creative and using the things that you need to as a jumping off point, and not have squashing those initial ideas, because some of those crazy ideas actually turn into the best ideas. So you don't want to squash those ideas. And teaching the kids FFOE and Scamper at the onset will help them, because they'll have some of the vocabulary, like what could we combine? What recycled materials could we combine to make a costume? Because we don't have a costume for this, or we don't want to use a costume that we have. We want to be more creative. So teaching them this lingo can really help. Let's go ahead on to the next of our tools. Plus, minus, interesting. Take it, Nancy.
All right. This is one of my favorites because it's so simple, but it's so useful. Plus, minus, interesting. With the little guys, let's say if you're doing a primary team, instead of plus, minus, interesting, I call it yay, boo, ah. Because your plus or your yay is if we use this idea, what good things will happen. The boo or the minus, if we use this idea, what would be some of the problems we might have? And the interesting or ah is just, maybe there's something we don't know if it's a plus or a minus, but we hadn't thought of it before. Different. And I use this in my real life. Anytime I need to make a decision, I use a PMI chart. And if it's a family decision, we'll put it on the refrigerator and everybody will contribute. When my granddaughter was about 4, she wanted a cat. And I was not all that thrilled. I mean, you know, we'd raised our children. We didn't have pets at that time. So I said, all right, you make a PMI chart. And I explained to her what it was. It's 4 years old, but we did the yay, boo. I kind of let the interesting hang in there for a while. She started looking at books about cats. I would read it to her, and then she would make a note of that. So she gave me her PMI verbally, because, you know, a 4-year-old, the writing wasn't going to happen yet. But she told me what she thought. We have a cat. We still have the cat. The cat is 15, 16 years old now and a little senile, but it still reminds me that she needs a treat. So that was a case. And I tell kids, I said, you know, if you want to ask for something, don't just say, I want this. Make a PMI. Put down all the reasons this would be good for you to have. What would it would help you out? What are some problems? Because people want balance, you know, you can't say, oh, there's no problems. There's always problems. And then anything you learn that didn't fit either into a plus or minus. Simple chart, 3 columns, yay, boo, ah, plus, minus, interesting. Or, you know, I like the columns. I write it down because to me, I need to go back and look at it, and especially if other people are involved. But it's very simple. You don't need a lot of equipment. So that's why I like the PMIs overall. I think they're very powerful.
You can do this when you make large decisions on something in the problem together, and you really want to make sure that you're choosing the best of the ones that your team has thought about, or your team is choosing the best. The one that goes along with this is Dimono's hats. And one of the things on our PowerPoint that I've included is some details about this, but it's really about taking different perspectives. And Nancy's going to share with you a little bit about the different hats. And she even has some different hats that she'll show you. But the slide is to remind you later about some of the different hats, because they actually, some of them correlate with the PMI chart.
Dimono's hats, one of my favorites. Edward Dimono was not an educator. He was a businessman. But he started thinking that if somebody, thinking was too complicated. If somebody tells you to think about it, what does that mean? If I tell you to please walk over and turn the light switch off, you know exactly what I mean. If I tell you to think about something, it's just very fuzzy. So being a very intelligent guy, he's done pretty well. He owns his own island. He came up with things that would help people remember. Hats. Hats are fun. You wear them on next to your brain. You know, people like hats. And then he thought, I need something else to tie it together. So he did colors. Each hat or way of thinking had a different color. And at first he came up, the first hat was a black hat, which is looking for problems, looking for what could happen that might give you a problem. But then interesting thing happened. He was talking to people, and somebody said, why does something negative or problem have to be black? And he said, well, you know, I really hadn't thought of that. So feel free to make it purple. Purple is another very powerful color. But it's not negative. It's important. You wear that purple hat. When you wear your purple hat, you are looking for what things might cause us trouble. And I tell coaches too, let's say your kids are using recorded music. Would have been years ago, tape recorders, whatever they're doing now. If it's something that's plugged in, just walk by and kick the plug out while they're performing. Problem. What do we do if our music won't play? What do we do if someone forgets their part in the music? So it's a very powerful hat, because this will help you take care of problems before they come up. They're there. They're going to get you. But if you're ready for it, if you thought of it ahead of time, you're going to be okay. Next hat is the yellow hat. It's a contrast here. These hats have been in a box too long. They're all crumpled. Yellow hat is what's good about this idea. If we decide this, or if we decide to use this decision, what are the good things that will happen? Now, when I'm talking with kids in school, I would give them an example such as, starting the 1st of next month, all school children in Virginia must wear uniforms. Then you back up for a little bit because you're going to get blowback. I had put on my purple hat, and they had no end of problems with this idea. Well, who's going to pay for it? How many do we have to have? They're going to get dirty. What are we going to do with this? You know, they're really good at that. So now I say, okay, purple hat's done. We can go back to it later. What are some good things that will come about if all children in Virginia have to wear uniforms? And you get a little bit of silence because you're asking them to switch gears, and they're not used to doing that. And then someone usually the first thing I hear is, nobody will make fun of your clothes. Almost always that's the first one I hear. And then we go from there, all these different ideas for why it's a good idea. So then I say, well, you know, that's good. We've looked at problems, we've looked at the positives. I'm going to show you the hat that everybody, be it a child or adult, puts on the minute they hear a new idea. Red hat. Red hat thinking is emotion. You're not looking for problems, you're not looking for good things, it's just pure emotion, such as, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. I don't want to do it. They can't make me do that. Or, that's fantastic. Think of the time we'll save getting ready in the morning. I don't have to worry about what I'm going to wear and does it match anything? Or somewhere in between. So we talk about who are the people involved with this that would have an opinion, would have an emotion. What are the emotions? And they would name, some people would be happy because, and I said, well, why would they be happy? Because they didn't have to worry about what to wear. Some people would be sad. Why would they be sad? Well, because they like their own clothes. But we went through I said, well, how about your principal? How would she feel about this? Or he would feel about this idea? How would your parents feel about it? Your teacher? And you have to remind them it's only emotions now, feelings. So then comes the hat, the white hat. White hat is the facts. Just the facts, ma'am. We can't make a decision unless we have facts. So we talk about how are we going to get our facts? And the way we would get our facts changed dramatically from the time I started teaching in Fairfax until the time I retired. So, it's a whole ramet up there. But I just want the facts. How much will a uniform cost? Who's going to pay for it? How many uniforms do you need? If they say that everybody's going to do it by the 1st of next month, will there be enough uniforms? And all other responses. They want to know the facts. And of course, if somebody tries to sneak in a feeling or positive or that, you just kind of gently say, well, is that a fact? What's the difference between facts and feelings? How can you use facts to change feelings? So then you've done your homework, you've done your facts. The next hat is one that everybody seems to like a lot. It's the green hat. Green hat is creativity. Green meaning new beginnings. We think of spring and green and trees and grass getting green. Ideas, the most precious of ideas. You've done your homework, you've gotten facts. Now you can play with them. And kids aren't used to being given permission to play with an idea. So usually when I say that, they look at me like, huh? And I said, so you have to prime the pump. Well, let's say we've decided that we will wear uniforms. That's been the decision. And I remember somebody back when we were looking for problems said, well, the uniform would get dirty. So how about if they have at the beginning entrance to the school, a big archway, kind of like at the airport, and you come in with your dirty uniform, and the minute you walk through the other side, it's clean. And so then they kind of look at you, oh, that's what you mean by play with it. I said, yeah, this is not reality. Nobody's going to say, how expensive would it be? This is just let your mind jump off that jungle gym and play with the idea. So then they kind of start getting them, and they'll say, oh, well, maybe we could have an umbrella attached so that when you're walking to school and it starts raining, you just push the button and you have an umbrella. We're playing. All kinds of things. I got mood uniforms. made of a fabric that it would show if you were grumpy, it would be kind of dark and gray. And if you were happy, it would be a bright color. They love to do this. You have to pull them away from the green hat because once they catch on, they're hooked. Then you go to what I call the most powerful hat, the blue hat. The blue hat is the boss, in charge. Blue hat decides, do we need more red hat thinking? Have we had too much red hat thinking today? The blue hat is a list maker. So anytime you make a list, you're using your blue hat. Maybe you're going to have a party. In the olden days, we had parties. And you could invite people and you might make a list of who you wanted to invite. Maybe you want to write down all the jobs that you have to get done and then prioritize them. Which one is the most important? Anyway, that's blue hat thinking. Now, I can tell you, once the kids know this, they've gained another language. And knowing another language is empowering. So I would ask them, or before they leave, I'd say, okay, I want everybody to tell me tomorrow one way you used your blue hat thinking. And the most satisfying thing is when a kid comes up and says, Ms. Ragland, I used my green hat today. You've made it. You don't have to have hats. It can be as simple as colored construction paper. It can be in the shape of a hat or just a block of construction paper. Dollar store has all these cups in all 6 colors. You can do that. When you're evaluating an idea, you might have one member put on the green hat and come up with some play ideas. Or maybe everybody plays, then you ask 1 or 2 of them to put the purple hat on for a minute. Many, many ways you can use it. But if you organize your ideas, wear your blue hat, you wear your white hat, get the facts, just the facts. You play with the facts, wear that green hat, learn how to play. Think about how people will feel about your idea. But remember, who do you have to think about? Who's going to care? Do that. You wear your yellow hat to think about the positives that will happen. You wear that all-important purple hat to think about what problems you might come up with. And what you have is just good thinking. This is a strategy. If you use this with your kids, it's not just for Odyssey, it will be with them for life. Pam, do you have anything to add to?
Yeah, So like one other way to like apply this is when I think about a past problem in Odyssey, there was actually a problem one year where they were required to have fish, and their different characters had to be fish. So imagine your team members. One of them's like, yippee, they're wearing their yellow hat and they're thinking, I love to go to the aquarium. I know all about fish. This is the greatest problem ever. And that's wearing their yellow hat, right? And then another kid puts on his white hat, his white thinking hat, and he's thinking, but we need to do some research. We need to figure out what are some of the different fish that we want to use. So we've got an expert here who's really excited with her yellow hat on. Well, I want to do some research and I want to look at all those facts. Or I want to check with the problem and see how many kinds of fish do we have? Can some of them be just completely made up? Do they all have to be real fish? So going back to the facts, and sometimes going back to the facts is actually reading the problem again, because those are important facts your team needs to know as well. You may have a kid who, as soon as they hear fish, they're like, oh, but I love cats. I could be a catfish. So they're reading their red hat, they're getting creative right away with a new idea, but they're running with their feelings. They want to be a catfish, they're going to be a catfish, no one can stop them. And then another teammate has their feeling hat on and they're like, but I want to be a catfish too. Well, so do I. Now we've got 3 catfish. Well, we need a variety of fish. So that person who's thinking about all the problems with the purple hat is like, wait, there's a problem here. We need a variety of creative fish. So we can't do it that. We can't do that. We can't have all catfish. So it's important to have those people with a purple hat who are always coming up with, but that's going to cause a problem. And then also the person who's jumping in there with their blue hat on and is directing the thinking process and thinking about the fact that we have too many feelings going on. We need to now look at some of the facts. And then maybe they read the problem and say, hey, wait, we do get to create our own fish. Let's think of a completely new fish. We know there can be catfish because that's a real fish. We know there are real porcupine fish, but what animal or something doesn't have a type of fish named after it that we could get really creative with? So using that green hat to create new ideas. So like thinking about how you can use those hats with your problem, whatever problem it is. So if you can teach these different strategies to your team, FFOE, brainstorming, FFOE, Scamper, PMI, and Dimono's hats, really early on when you're talking about stuff, it can be something that they can use throughout as they're working through the problem as a team. Remember to look really closely at the problem, because it's not just the synopsis. There's also a whole problem on the website that they need to read and know the rules to, or you read for them if they're primary or little guys. And I encourage you to go on to the Odyssey the Mind website and look up Virtual World Final Solutions, because VWF means Virtual World Finals. And believe it or not, they did have a competition this year, and it was virtual. So some kids could be stuck wondering how in the world they're going to perform in this virtual world. And watching some of these videos could actually start to prime the pump and get their creativity going once they see how some other kids are creative. Creativity can be taught, and you as a coach are going to be one of their teachers. So use the ideas that we've come up with, give them some of the resources, but remember that even though you may be as creative as can be, this is the team's problem to solve. So it's not your problem, it's the team's problem. So remember that you will not be making costumes or building sets or thinking of the ideas or telling them what to do or say. That's on them. And as creative as you may be, you have to sit on your hands and you have to tie your mouth shut and just let them come up with the solutions. However, in this era of being virtual, you are able to help with the tech stuff. So don't feel bad about doing that. Just make sure you read the program guide so that you know which things you can do and which things you can't in this virtual environment. But we want you to be creative with the kids. We want you to encourage their creativity and keep it fun, because these are really hard times for all of us. And the best reason to do this is to add some fun and social interaction into their lives, even if they're on Zoom or Discord, which is the next training that's coming up. We want them to be able to be creative and social and get a chance to really use their brain and problem solve. So you might not be able to pass the hats around, but you can certainly splash up a picture of a hat and have them talking about the good things about an idea or the problems with the purple hat. So please just enjoy Odyssey this year with those kids, because they have an opportunity to be creative, and you want to be at the helm with them, sometimes wearing the blue hat for them and helping direct. Any final thoughts, Nancy?
I just think it's such an opportunity to take some children who maybe are thinking on a very concrete level and show them ways to elevate that, so you can think of things in more than one way. And we're making flexible thinkers who can go from one idea and then do the opposite way and think about something. If you could get children to do that, that's more than a lot of adults, because a lot of adults have trouble looking at a problem through more than one screen. So sometimes we adults need to put on these hats too and think about, oh, I didn't think about that. Maybe it's a wonderful way to get kids going. Creativity a lot of kids have a mistaken idea that creativity is just saying funny things out loud, and that's creative. This teaches them creativity has to have a purpose and some guidelines. If it doesn't, then you're just saying boodly squish, which is might make you laugh, but it doesn't do anything. So we hope that we've given you enough that you can really have a great year with your kids.
Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you tuning in, and have great fun in Odyssey. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh, are there any questions?
Yeah, yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm not turning my camera on because I don't want to be, at the in the recording. But I wanted to ask a fine-tuned question in regards to how to be creative without, or how to get them to be creative without saying them without telling them what to say or what to do. Because when you said that, and I've done Odyssey already for a couple of years, but I just wanted to sort of get a refresher on brainstorming, and I'm glad I did. I remember all of the tools you talked about, and I do use them from time to time, but I, sort of wanted to get a refresher on, for instance, you talked about teaching them the tools, the FFOE, the Scamper, the talking about Dimono's hats, and you gave the specific example, for instance, with the fish, or some other problems that you had. So when we're teaching them the tools and trying to get them to use them and trying to get them to be creative, we can give those examples, for instance, to get them to understand, and then to get them to get the return from them. So I'm not sure if I'm able to articulate my question well, but
I think what you're asking is, can we give examples that aren't related to the problem? And you absolutely could.
Okay.
That aren't related to the problem. What you don't want to do is take a problem that is about fish and have them do brainstorming about a fish, and then you give them the answers. Because if you can do brainstorming about whatever your problem's about, but that's the time not to insert yourself. But you can do brainstorming about stuff that's completely unrelated, and that way you can open up the discussion and be teaching them the tool and not feel like it's outside assistance.
Okay, but when you're first teaching the tool and you're trying to get them to understand how to be flexible, or how to, substitute, do you, let's say, take not your own problem, but do you take a specific question or problem, and then you go first and say, for instance, if I wanted to substitute, this is what I would do, and then expect further responses from them? Because if they don't know it, right, and you said substitute or FFOE or whatever, like if you didn't start it off, like I just wanted to know what your advice is for that.
I think what you need to do is ask another question.
Mm-hmm.
We use the Socratic Method a lot, which is basically just asking more questions. So if you, for instance, say, what could we substitute for this poster board? And you don't get any responses, you just rephrase it in another way. What's another thing that we could write on, like we could write on poster board?
Mm-hmm.
Just keep asking questions. But if you start out by telling them, for example, I think they're going to think, oh, I don't know that I could come up with anything better than that. So just keep asking questions.
Okay, but it's fine to say, okay, let's be flexible, let's be original, let's elaborate, for instance, for the FFOE or for Scamper, to say, let's substitute, let's, so it's fine to say that and to get them to try to do that and think of how they can substitute, how they can rearrange. That's
a tool. You're using a tool.
Okay.
Every other team has access to those same tools.
Okay.
That's by basis. If you are taking them to the library to research, that's okay, because every other team could go to a library to research. It's not okay if you say, I want you to go read this particular book.
Okay.
But you could lay out books for example, or, you know, you let them say, how would I find a book on what I need? So a lot of
Okay.
questioning, but yeah, it's a tool. That's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. This was very useful, very helpful.
Thank you for coming.
Sure,
Yes.
thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Any other questions? All right, well, then this concludes our presentation on creativity. The next one will be coming on at 2 o'clock, and that will be on using the Discord app. So we hope you stay tuned in, or you click on the next video in the playlist and enjoy that one too. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.